What's going on, YouTube? So this is going to be a little different video. I'm just going to be doing an overview of my RX7 behind me. So this is the car here. It is a 1987 Turbo 2. So it's a Series 4 FC. Yeah, I've had this car for about 4 years now, and it's kind of a special car to me because it was actually my uncle's car. One of my uncles bought it new off the lot in '86. Had it for a number of years, and then another one of my uncles got the car. He bought it off of him. And had it up until around 4 years ago. And yeah, it had 180,000 kilometers on it, or around there, when I got the car. When I got the car, it was bone stock, nothing done to it, but the interior is in really good shape. But the engine, on the other hand, was blown. So I started tearing apart that engine, trying to rebuild it, and learned it was going to be really expensive. So that's when I decided to put in something a little bit different under the hood, which we'll get to in a second. I'll start off by just going around the exterior of the car, and we'll talk about that a little bit, then we'll get into the engine and interior. So starting at the front of the car here, running a full GP Sports kit. So we got the GP Sports front bumper, factory Turbo 2 hood. Really love the look of that. Yeah, as you can probably tell, I've converted the whole car to Series 5 moldings. Originally I didn't really want to do that, but unfortunately, the GP Sports kits only come with the Series 5 kind of moldings all the way around. So luckily I found some locally sourced door trim to match that, which was kind of cool. Yeah, factory Series 4 Turbo 2 mirrors, which I painted black. I didn't really want to go through the trouble of trying to wrap those, so they are what they are. It's got a sunroof, which I think is kind of sweet, and these actually open up all the way back to here, so you have kind of a moon roof, if you will. I guess you can pop your hands through and whatnot, which is kind of nice in the summertime. GP Sports side skirts here. The wheels I'm running are ATEX, so they're 17 by 9 plus 38 in the rear, 17 by 8 plus 35 in the front with our 1-inch spacer, just to get the fitment a little bit nicer. I really like the look of these wheels. You know, they're kind of like a cheaper rep wheel, I guess, knockoff, but I'm really happy how they came out. I turned some center caps on the lathe to fit in there, so kind of stoked how that turned out. And then I got just some Gorilla kind of tuner style lugs on all the wheels. Moving around to the back side, GP Sports rear bumper. Then we've got just the stock Series 4 taillights. I might eventually do like an S5 conversion on them, but for now I kind of like the way it looks with the Series 4 taillights. Factory hatch with the wiper there. Moving around to this side, again, same sort of deal. I did go ahead and paint these with like an epoxy paint on the wipers, so just kind of cleans them up, make a little bit fresher. Yeah, I'm actually missing one of my windshield wiper squirters there. I think it fell off drifting at some point, so looking for a new one of those right now. But yeah, that's pretty much the exterior of the car. It's not like super low right now. I find it like a really drivable height. The only time I have issues is like any kind of sharp slants going into a gas station or what have you. I do scrape the front bumper a bit, but other than that, it's been all right. When I got this car, it was in super rough shape exterior wise. It was really rough. It was peeling clear coat everywhere. The rear quarters were pretty much rotted out. So I actually grafted a piece from another car, an FC I cut up, put a piece in here, and I believe another piece was like right around here. So that's from another FC I welded in there and body worked that. That whole fender underneath was rotted out, so I made a whole new panel. You can't see it because it's underneath the side skirt here, but that's replaced basically from here down. So that was kind of a cool project doing that. What else? There's a big dent in the quarter, or the B-pillar, sorry, on this side. So yeah, there's a big dent here from my uncle actually putting this thing into a ditch, I believe, going up a mountain. But yeah, I body worked all that in, made that look pretty. Yeah, this was all peeling back here. The doors weren't in bad shape. There was some, normal door dings, pretty typical for a 30-plus-year-old car, that I fixed up there. The hood was in really good shape, and the fenders, like, for the most part, besides that rust, was in good shape. So those were able to be saved pretty well. I will point out there is a couple issues with the wrap that have kind of developed over time. I did this pretty much a year ago on the spot, so over time, I think with just sunlight, this has actually started to lift here. So what I'm thinking of doing is just running a whole new strip all the way around here to kind of clean that up. So I'd cut it kind of at the seam here. This rear bumper is also going to get rewrapped pretty quickly here. Again, I had some lifting issues right there. It's actually pretty bad on the other side, so I'm going to need to run this in two pieces. I wrapped this in one piece for the whole kind of lower section below the trim here, but it really needs like to be a two-piece wrap with a seam on this body line here. So you can see I'm lifting there. There's also some damage under here from a track day drifting, so I want to fix that as well. Just got the exhaust here, so that is a Vibrant Street Power muffler coming out to kind of a turn down tip I made. I'll talk more about that once we get into the engine stuff, but basically, yeah, single exit, 3-inch all the way back. Yeah, as far as brakes on this car, I'm basically just running the factory brakes all around. I did replace the front calipers with FD calipers. They're like remans from the States, so those are on there. Like new pads and rotors. I did like Hawk HP Plus pads, which are awesome. Once you get them heated up, they just lock up all the wheels if you want them to. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the exterior of the car. I'll plug a pic somewhere in here of what it used to look like before I got it, and you can kind of see the progress to where it is now. But yeah, I'm just stoked to be driving this thing. It's been like 4 years of work, not a lot of driving time. There was 1 year I drove it in Burnaby, actually at BCIT for school, which was a disaster, but it was fun nonetheless. So now this thing is just like a nice street car, you know. It's just doesn't make a ton of power, but it's a lot of fun to drive around. So I think next up we'll move on to the engine bay, and I'll show you the swap I'm running on this thing. Okay, so before I talk about this, just some backstory. This car did come factory with a turbo 13B rotary, and I tore apart the engine because it needed to be rebuilt. It was smoking. Started looking into it, pricing out parts, and actually ordered some, and then I was just like, you know what? This is gonna be too much money for what I could afford at the time. This is 4 years ago. And I started looking around for engines. Was kind of interested in SRs, and then I'd never heard of these before, CA18. So I started looking into them, and I really loved the way they sound. They've kind of got like almost an exhaust note of an RB26. Obviously it doesn't sound really close to it, but it's there, you know. It's got that kind of raspy sound, and for a 4-cylinder, I thought it was a really cool engine, and one had popped up locally, so I bought it, and then the swap started. So anyways, I had the first engine here, which I'll put a pic to now. I ran that thing for a few months. It actually had an S15 turbo on it, so it was a GT28R, I believe. And yeah, I knew nothing about like turbo motors at the time, so being an idiot, I turned the boost up to, you know, like 18-20 psi, and it was fast for about a month, and then it broke. Basically it lost compression on 2 cylinders. I had like 0 psi on one, and upon further inspection, when I tore the motor apart a couple of years later, it actually cracked the ring lands everywhere. They basically fell apart. Pistons fell apart as I pulled them out of the block. Anyhow, I scrapped that motor and started looking for a new one, and this one popped up in Vancouver for a really good deal, so I bought it. And basically the seller stated that it had low compression, just like my other one, but it still ran. So anyways, I tore it apart. Everything was in really good shape. It was just like one of the piston rings was pretty much gone, so I basically fully rebuilt the engine with stock internals. Basically just like rock auto parts to rebuild this thing. So parts for a 1987 Pulsar NX actually fit this engine. It came with the same C18 but naturally aspirated. So I basically am running full rock auto piston rings, bearings, Velcro seals, Velcro head gasket, that sort of thing. And it's been great. It makes 160 psi on all cylinders, and it's been that way for a while now. It's awesome. So yeah, it's basically freshly rebuilt. Did all the seals, powder coated some stuff while I was at it. Went back to my old high school. Teacher was really cool there and let me powder coat the pulleys, sort of power steering pump bracket, that sort of thing. Yeah, I kind of cleaned up and did paint this a while ago. It's a little scratched now. Did the intake manifold, that sort of thing. Yeah, the engine is basically stock. The only things done to it are an SR20 T25 turbo, so it's a little bit bigger than the CA stock turbo. That's running 10 psi through an Apexi boost controller, and then it's also got Tomy pond cams in it, which actually do make a really nice difference for these cars. It just gives it a little bit more torque around like 4,500 RPM. You can really feel it open up and pull all the way to red lines. So nice upgrade that came with this engine I bought. One more thing, I guess, kind of a mod, but these CAs came stock from Japan, the Japanese version anyways, with butterfly valves in the inlet manifold. So there's 4 that are closed to like improve boost response at low RPM. They're closed until I believe 3,800 RPM, then they open up. So I basically wired that in, so I'm running a Volvo cruise control unit to control those. Really simple, just you just need power, ground, and then the ground wire from the ECU goes to that. There's 3 pins on the bottom. So as far as the actual swap goes, there are quite a few things done to make it work in this car. So I'll just start off with another engine thing. So the oil pan is stock CA pan that I modified to be rear sump. So stock, these cars had the oil pickup, these engines had the oil pickup on the front of the block, but I basically ran it to the rear, and I'm running a trapdoor sump. So you can kind of see down there, it's pretty big, so it increased the oil capacity by just over a liter, which is kind of nice. And yeah, trapdoor baffled sump, I'll link a photo to here, which I made a few months ago. That's been working great. Obviously it's got custom engine mounts, which I fabricated. I went through like a few iterations of that design. This is, I think, the 3rd one. So I got the engine actually sitting slightly off to the passenger side, and what that does is just give me some room for the exhaust, because stock the 13Bs were on the passenger side, which has got the hollowed out trans tunnel for the exhaust, but I need a little bit extra room, and it also kind of helps set off the weight from the driver if I'm just driving it, which is kind of nice. So engine mounts are custom, transmission mounts custom, and the drive shaft is custom as well. I'm basically running like 240SX yoke into the transmission, stock S13 stuff, and then it was just the Turbo 2 drive shaft in there that got shortened. For the clutch, I'm just running a braided line from the stock master there for the clutch. Yeah, braided line goes down to the slave on this side, as you can see there. For the fuel lines, they're actually on the driver's side factory for a 13B. I actually made whole new hard lines from the tank running on the passenger side of the car. So you can probably kind of see I relocated the filter right here. It's just a stock 13B filter replacement. The hard lines basically just come out there and into the fuel rail right here. This factory speedo is working. What I'm using is actually a Z31 speed sensor into the CA transmission, and it actually screws right into the stock speedo line for the RX7. So that is just running in right there. And they give you enough line from the factory to kind of sneak around the trans and get it in to the sensor there. So that worked out good, and it is actually fairly accurate. It reads, I don't know, a couple kilometers an hour faster than what you're actually doing. So as far as wiring goes, what I'm running is basically a stock C18 harness. It's been pretty heavily modified to fit this car, so I pretty much modified it to be a standalone unit, and I did that all a few months ago. I was running a pretty hacked up harness for quite a while, but yeah, this is it coming out here, and yeah, it runs to all the accessories. Everything is stock there, so the car idles and does its kind of cold warm-up thing, no problem, which is nice to have. Yeah, I'll link a photo to that whole kind of wiring harness setup right here. Pretty stoked how that turned out. Put a few hours into that thing. Another thing for the wiring on this car, stock the 13B came with like the starter and alternator on this side of the engine bay. So basically I've extended the wires from the fuse box there, which I relocated to behind the strut tower, all the way up along the firewall there. And then they basically snake down and come along this frame rail. And starter's at the back there, and alternator is right there. One thing I do need to get hooked up eventually is the cruise control unit here. I basically just need another cable reel, I believe it's called, to come off of this. So I've got a CA18DET throttle body, which I'm going to try and kind of mix and match parts onto the CA throttle body to fit another cable here eventually. I was running an eBay front mount kit I got quite a few years ago. It works pretty good. No complaints with it, no leaks or anything, so that's good. Just all eBay piping and whatnot. Tucked a pod filter right in there, which worked out okay. For cooling, this is a rad I just put in here because I blew up the old rad at the track. This is just a JAGS unit, pretty universal thing I got on eBay. Could probably use a shroud on here. Well, it really could. But on the street driving, I've had no issues with temp with this thing in here. And again, got this quite a few years ago, but it works great. eBay oil filter relocation kit running to an oil cooler. I've got my Dafy gauges, kind of sensors plugged into there. But yeah, just mounted in the stock location right now, and it keeps the oil temps all good, never really exceeds 180 on the street. I am going to be doing a V-mount setup this winter on this car. The reason being, this is actually a really inefficient setup right now. As you see, as the air goes through the front mount, first heat exchanger, then through the oil cooler and through the rad, that air is heating up each time it moves through there. So with a V-mount setup, I'm going to have basically the intercooler on the top here, oil cooler kind of in the middle of the V, and then the radiator laying down. And what that'll do is just get fresh air to all three heat exchangers and make the car a little bit more efficient in that aspect for temps. Right now, if I do any drifting or heavy driving on the car, it gets hot really quickly. So for the power steering pump on this swap, it's running the stock CA pump into the stock FC rack there, and I've basically just used an AN line and some different adapters to fit that on like so. That second port on the steering rack is blocked off. I can't remember what that was for the 13B, but that's like a low pressure port, so that's blocked off and no issues there. Running the stock power steering cooler that loops around the front of the car here. So for the exhaust, I'm running a full 3-inch turbo back stainless exhaust I made a few months ago. Yeah, so it basically goes down to a flex pipe from the turbo there into a high flow cat, then vibrant ultra quiet resonator, then to a vibrant street power exhaust. And I really like the way it sounds right now. I think it really brings out the sound of the CA. It's like quiet at low revs and low throttle, but as soon as you step on it, it really opens up and sounds really nice. So, and again, that's the one of the main reasons I went with the CA. I just really love the way they sound. Sort of got a hand to that RB26 sound in my opinion. So I think that's pretty much it for the engine bay. Drop a comment if you want to see more on this or me to explain a little bit more about it, but I think I covered most of it right now. Let's move on to the interior now. All right, so onto the interior of the car here. The door up. First thing you'll probably notice, running a Sparco Grid Q seat with Sparco side mount brackets and then a planted seat base. Yeah, this thing is basically as slammed as I could get it. It's tilted all the way back and basically as far back as I could get it as well. So it fits me really comfortably and I can actually sit with the helmet on the car, no problem. In Garage Moon Power, triple style floor match. Thanks a lot to my sister Emma for hooking me up with those for Christmas. I love them. I think they're a nice addition to the car. I've got Sparco pedal covers on there. I believe they're actually for like a Mark IV Golf or something, but I kind of modified them to fit the FC pedals, and it just makes heel towing a little bit easier with that extra little addition to the gas pedal there. Just go through the gauges I'm running. Greddy turbo gauge, AEM wideband, and then we've got, there we go, Defi. No, it says fuel pressure. That's actually my oil pressure gauge. Got a really good deal on that. As long as these guys, Defi oil temp gauge, and then Defi water temp gauge. So I can't remember the exact, oh yeah, D gauge. That was the brand, says it right on there. These are kind of a cool gauge from Defi that I didn't really know about, but they're a standalone gauge. So you don't need that like Defi Link monitor thing to run them. They're actually just run on their own, which is kind of sweet. Yeah, running in a Pexi AVCR boost controller, which also doubles as a boost gauge. That's kind of cool. I love the kind of 90s, early 2000s look of this. I think it's a nice addition to the car. Just some crappy eBay head unit, but it does the job. I don't really listen to music in here too often, but it's there. This is actually an acrylic insert panel I went through a couple iterations of it. This is kind of the final design. So I've just got like a switch for my fuel pump, just an emergency shut off if I need it, fan switch, and then gauge switch. And then I've also got an ECU and wideband hookup. So this car is running Nistune, a Nistune ECU. So yeah, I'm pretty much done street tuning it now, but if I need to make any changes, it's really easy. Just plug the laptop in to those guys there. This kind of gauge holder here is where the stock warning lights would be. And I 3D printed this and then kind of worked it with Bondo. I kind of had some issues fully designed it the way I wanted to in CAD program. So yeah, I basically kind of bodyworked that, if you will, and then just painted it black. Fits in there nicely. And on this side, this is just like a pretty generic eBay, I think it was a Glow Shift brand gauge holder for the pillar here, which, it fits all right. The defrost panels here, the vent panels, are also laser cut acrylic, which I designed. So yeah, running those there, also running them up here on top of the dash. And yeah, basically when I got the car, they were in really rough shape and cracking. So yeah, I made some new ones. Running Momo steering wheel, courtesy of my buddy Ben. Thank you for that. It's a little beat up, but it does the job. And then yeah, just silver Momo horn button and Momo steering hub right here. Like an S5 tombstone on here, S5 kind of surround, because the stock one that came with the car was really cracked and in poor condition. Running a custom shift knob, which I machined on the lathe, and just an eBay drift button here. Just on the passenger side of the car now. It's pretty stock on this side. Again, garage moon power floor mat, stock turbo 2 seat, and if we pull that up here, I've actually relocated the battery to the storage bin here. So running that in there with a breaker, just in case. Yeah, you might notice that kind of black coating on the floor there. That's Noiko sound deadening I basically installed on the whole kind of rear end of the car from here back, just to help with the noise from the diff a little bit. Yeah, this is the rear of the car. Kind of a cool angle looking in at the cockpit there. But yeah, pretty stock for the most part. I've got the factory cargo straps on there, and what have you. Running some kind of crappy Walmart speakers, but you know what, they're a little bit better than the stock ones, so that's not too bad. I painted this with like an epoxy paint in here. It was in pretty rough shape, kind of rusting a little bit around the drain holes for the hatch here, so it just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. It's a little dusty right now, but the last thing I'll talk about on the car here is the suspension setup. So it is running Silver's Neomax coilovers all the way around. If you're in the market for coilovers for an FC and you live in Canada, I'd highly recommend them. I got them from iRace Autosports and they're fantastic. I've driven this car in the winter, kind of on and off the road for a few years now, and they've been great. The collars have like seized up at times, but I got those freed up, and just be sure to put a lot of anti-seize on them, on the threads, and it'll be no problem. I've basically taken off every arm and replaced the bushings with Prothane bushings, I believe. They're kind of like energy suspension, just a little bit cheaper. So I did those on the whole front end. And on the rear, I'm running like a full PBM setup. So PBM diff bushings, PBM subframe bushings, TWR camber link, I believe. And then I've actually shortened the stock sublinks of the trailing arms to get rid of some of the negative camber. So we're pretty much sitting, I believe, like -1 camber in the rear right now. You can barely even notice it. Really happy how that turned out. And yeah, subframes front and rear have been taken off, sandblasted, and then painted and clear coated. So I've done that, as well as all the arms stepped to the stock front control arms. And around like the center back on the car was all rotted out when I got it, especially in around the inner quarter panels on the inner fender there. So I did basically a summer of work patching all those, undercoated the car, did like pour 15 on it, then undercoated it. So that is like all restored underneath now. It's really clean under there. I'll try and link a shot to the before and after that right now. So that's pretty much it on the car right now. I could spend a lot longer talking about like the process for each kind of modification and the swap and whatnot, but I think that's enough talking. Let's fire this thing up and we'll just do a quick sound check on it. it's running a Blitz blow-off valve with a custom trumpet I made. So it sounds kind of cool. I've set the spring pretty hard so it like flutters on low throttle and only really goes off above like 5 psi. So a couple revs from right here. All right, let's go for a drive now.